Michelle left me permanently for a man called John Smith. Or shall I say that during one of the times we were parted, she took up with a man and shortly after that had some bad luck and died. Anyway, she never came back to me. I knew him, this John Smith. Once at a party he tried to sell me a gun, and later at the same party he made everyone quiet down for a few minutes because I was singing along with the radio and he liked my voice. Michelle went to Kansas City with him, and one night when he was out, she took a lot of pills, leaving a note beside her on his pillow where he'd be sure to find it and rescue her. But he was so drunk when he got home that night that he just laid his cheek down on the paper she'd written on and went to sleep. When he woke up the next morning, my beautiful Michelle was cold and dead. She was a woman, a traitor and a killer. Males and females wanted her, but I was the only one who ever could have loved her. For many weeks after she died, John Smith confided to people that Michelle was calling to him from the other side of life. She wooed him. She made herself seem more real than any of the visible people around him, the people who were still breathing, who were supposed to be alive. When I heard, shortly after that John Smith was dead, I wasn't surprised. That's an excerpt from the short story Dirty Wedding, from the collection by Denis Johnson, Jesus' Son. This is a 1992 collection of short fiction by Denis Johnson. It is a strange collection. It's very luminous and liminal, and for those that have read Bolaños 2666, the feeling is reminiscent of the early sections of 2666. Another sort of atmospheric similarity would be something akin to a drier David Lynch film. You feel very uneasy, you feel drawn along, but you also sort of you feel very lonely and very vulnerable with this book. It's very unique. The premise is actually relatively simple, and in a way, you get everything you don't expect from this kind of book. So, what I mean by that is that this is, on the surface, is a book about an unnamed narrator in his 20s, who later on we find out has been nicknamed Fuckhead. Sort of an allusion to the fact that he's always messing up, but I don't really see this as an important idea. I think mainly he really is unnamed. On the surface, you have an unnamed narrator who is addicted to heroin and alcohol, and who is seemingly bumbling chaotically through life through these sort of cynical, kitchen sink realist moments of down and out, truly bottom of the barrel despair. So in one sense, this book can be put into the genre of, drug-based addiction fiction. But that's not really right, because a lot of that fiction, which is actually one of my least favorite genres, if not my least favorite genre, is the Hunter S. Thompson or Trainspotting type fiction with this air of chaos around it. I tend to dislike it. It always feels a bit contrived and forced for me, and I think it's not for me. But this, absolutely, I just wouldn't put it in that category of drug-fueled chaos that has a little air, always has a little tinge of excitement. But at the same time, this book isn't completely pushing this lifestyle away in the sense of something like Requiem for a Dream, in the sense of turning up the harrowing, bleak nature to such a degree that one wouldn't even want to see the word heroin, let alone go near it. Of course, this isn't promoting it, but the chaotic aspects, or seemingly chaotic aspects, of the unnamed narrator's life that come about from the fact of his addictions to drugs and heroin, as far as I'm concerned, are actually in the background, and what enters in the foreground is the loss of the narrator's self to some strange, phantasmagorical, semi-fantastical, preternatural ability of the narrator to have a relationship with the world which is at times out of time and out of space. And this is solidified by the first short story in the collection, which, if someone now had to ask me what is your favorite short story, or if someone asked me what do you think is the most accomplished short story that you've ever read, it's now between Thomas Ligotti's The Frolic or the opening story to this collection, which is Denis Johnson's Car Crash While Hitchhiking, which is just pitch perfect, every word perfect, phenomenal. And it's a simple premise of the unnamed narrator getting into a car while hitchhiking and then going through a car crash, but having a sort of premonition as to the fact they're going to crash, which does happen, and it's all described in this exquisite liminal detail. But it's the fact of this weird placement of his mind within this world, which begets this quiet, liminal, lonely atmosphere, as if you opening a book with a car crash, which is at one and the same time explicitly a car crash filled with death and the risk of an infant child, which is being at one point held sort of strangely and quietly alongside the raining, grim road. At the same time, so you have this chaotic car crash, but to me, the car crash is oddly quiet. It happens in all the explicit detail of a legitimate car crash, but it's strange, and you just feel weird about the whole thing. And each one of these stories puts you in this position that the heroine and the addiction is the unconscious, forgotten foundation to this weird, liminal, lonely state that we find ourselves in within these stories. And these stories are all connected by the fact of the unnamed narrator, but they're all also connected thematically. And in a way, they could be sort of mixed around and not much would change. And that's not really meant as a criticism, as such as the world of these characters, the world of this book is a very explicit, very, very real world that I would say carries across the pond from friends that I've sort of known or have drifted off into this form of lifestyle, of people that I occasionally see that are just drifting around, doing odd jobs, and who have addictions to drugs. This behind the scenes, liminal, passive relationship to the world, a sort of accepted determinism, a kitchen sink determinism, completely carries across. And it's that and Johnson's own, I think, biographical ability, because he himself, I don't know much about Johnson at all, but for most of his 20s he was addicted to drugs and alcohol, so there's probably a lot of biographical material here. His distinct ability to make a character who appears maybe only for 10, 15 pages to feel absolutely fully fleshed out, and as if you're reading a real life, and that if you remove just a couple of little fictional bits here or there, this could be almost a book that's like a thorough documentary of addiction and what this life looks like. But there's another strange aspect, and I just want to read one excerpt to outline, I think, what Johnson is doing. So, of course, we have the title Jesus' Son. We have throughout the book these very subtle references to redemption, to forgiveness, to the notion of being right at the bottom and searching for a figure such of Christ, or for a true compassion. And this is an excerpt from the short story Two Men. I got out of the car. I went to the house and rang the doorbell and stepped back off the porch, looking up at the overhead window in the dark. The white curtain moved again, and a woman said something. All of her was invisible except the shadow of a hand on the curtain's border. If you don't take him off our street, I'm calling the police. I was so flooded with yearning, I thought it would drown me. Her voice broke off and floated down. I've got the phone now. Now I'm dialing. She called down softly. I thought I heard a car's engine somewhere not too far away. I ran back to the street. What is it? Richard said as I got in. Headlights came around the corner. A A spasm ran through me so hard it shook the car. "Jesus," I said. The interior filled up with light so that for 2 seconds you could have read a book. The shadows of dust streaks on the windshield striped Tom's face. "It's nobody," Richard said, and the dark closed up again as whoever it was went past. And there we see just this perfect moment of symbolic allegory of the invocation, this bottom of the barrel moment of violence and hostility, and having the police called on you in a very banal way. And amidst that, the invocation of Jesus' name begets this luminosity in the car, which comes about by headlights by something real, and then is his the unnamed narrator's friend says it's nobody, and the shadow passes away. They sort of pass away the possibility of redemption, the possibility of hope, the possibility of something more. But it's this strange balancing act that Jesus' Son, this whole collection, has of exactly that, of strange, phantasmagorical, fantastical, but cynically pessimistic fantastical possibilities, completely embedded within a realist, highly empirical setting that for the whole thing just unnerves you and leaves you completely open and vulnerable to this world. And many people do subsume this book into sort of read it in such a way that what's happening in these stories, which often is, it's taking place with they're taking part in sort of hospitals and alleys and bars and these typical sort of Hubert Selby Jr. type locations of drug chaos, reminiscent of McCarthy's Suttree in in Knoxville. These kind of down and out dirty bars. But the chaos, as far as I'm concerned, I just couldn't feel it that way. What should be a chaotic, perhaps rollick, or becomes really a quiet, once again to repeat myself, a quiet, liminal, eerie setting of people just looking for a moment of comfort, but not having the full strength to move towards something such as, in this case, this strange feeling of redemption that is in the background at all times. And this isn't to spoil anything, but this is right at the end of the book in the piece Beverly Home. During my regular hours at Beverly Home, the full-time employees had their shift change, and a lot of them congregated, coming and going, in the kitchen where the time clock was. I often went in there and flirted with some of the beautiful nurses. I was just learning to live sober, and in fact I was often confused, especially because some antibusi I was taking was having a very uncharacteristic effect on me. Sometimes I heard voices muttering in my head, and a lot of the time the world seemed to smoulder around its edges. But I was in a little better physical shape every day. I was getting my looks back and my spirits were rising, and this was all in all a happy time for me. All these weirdos and me getting a little better every day, right in the midst of them. I had never known, never even imagined for a heartbeat, that there might be a place for people like us. It does end on this note, a little note of hope, but it's an alienated note of hope with regard to the people who've been in the book, that have been full of violence and addiction and despair, but they consistently find themselves clothed, and we do as the clothed, and we do as the reader for the time that we are reading in this, and this is a complete paradox, but the cold, warming comfort of this liminal atmosphere, that even at the times of the lowest, there is a redemptive possibility in the liminal realist void that is found in Johnson's writing. And so what the usual elements of drug fiction, the highs, the extreme highs, the sort of extreme, possibly psychedelic highs, and also extreme sort of vomit-ridden lows, are really subordinated to something much more subtle in this, and it's an unmatched literary atmosphere. And for something that is only about 125 pages, it has an astounding effect that is very quick to find itself almost immediately. And I will repeat again that Car Crash While Hitchhiking, the first story, is absolutely a masterpiece. It's just completely phenomenal. And I have little more to say, but I will say that I'll be reading more Denis Johnson because I'm a big fan of distinct atmospheres in books. And this is a must read at some point, and this is something you will read very, very quickly, feeling yourself, clothed by this liminal, cold, possibly redemptive light, and carried through to the end where possibly not that much changes. But as you'll see from the first story, once you get going, you didn't really have a choice in the matter all along. And so you've just got to kind of find a pessimistic, bleak, determinist enjoyment in the fact of this atmosphere that you have been given and been afforded to. And as in a way of coming full circle, the beginning isn't a choice, and the end is really the continuation of the fact it's not a choice. But it's finding that within that non-choice, actually, there was something that was truly for you, for these people. And maybe it's not nice, maybe it's not an Eden, but it's an embrace. It's an embrace of the alienation that they all find throughout the book. And that's just my very quick thoughts on Denis Johnson's Jesus' Son. So pick it up, give it a read. It's quite frosty book. Read it in the morning or very, very late at night. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Thanks very much for listening.